continue with the program, and at this time it is my honor to introduce Carole Starr. Carole sustained a traumatic brain injury in 1999 from a car accident. She was unable to return to her role as teaching, and she had a consulting business and also her hobby, performing classical music. After the accident, she struggled to take care of herself and felt like a burden to both her family and friends. I had the pleasure to be able to work with Carole and her neuro treatment team here at New England Rehab Hospital, so I know firsthand how far she has come. With perseverance and tenacity, she was able to accomplish all the things that she has done, and right now you see a very accomplished woman before you. It is her organizational and leadership skills that have made this workshop a tremendous success. We all look up to Carole Starr.
Wow, you didn't even hear what I had to say yet. I want to thank all of you again for being here tonight. As you know, the theme of tonight has been happiness, and seeing all of you here certainly makes me very happy. I'm going to begin my remarks tonight with two quotes. The first is by Helen Keller. When one door of happiness closes, another opens. But often we look so long at the closed door that we do not see the one which has been opened before us. The second is by Winston Churchill. Never, never, never give up. I combined the two of them to create the title for my speech, which is Never Give Up on Happiness. As many of you in this room know quite well, brain injury tends to do quite a number on happiness. It can alter or destroy so many fulfilling aspects of life. The ability to hold a job, to interact with family and friends, to pursue hobbies, to take care of oneself. It doesn't just close a door of happiness, it slams it shut, then burns it, or so it felt to me. To find happiness again, I had to tear myself away from the wreckage of the old door, find the new door, and then figure out how to unlock it. For a really long time after my injury, I wanted desperately for somebody to give me a definitive plan, to say, if you see these doctors and these therapists and do these exercises, you will make a full recovery. It seemed like I found useful treatments haphazardly, and nobody could guarantee me a full recovery. The more that I searched for the correct plan, the more frustrated I got, and the more elusive both happiness and recovery became. Eventually, I had to accept that everyone has to navigate their own unique, long, bumpy road of twists and turns and dead ends, hills and valleys, of good days and bad. That's why Winston Churchill's advice to never give up is so very important for all of us. What I'm going to share with you this evening are some of the key actions and moments that have helped me along my own bumpy road back to happiness. I just used the word key on purpose because I'm going to continue with Helen Keller's metaphor of the door. The keys to finding and unlocking my own door of happiness have included regaining a sense of independence, a sense of competence, and a sense of purpose, as well as a few epiphanies, which I'll get to later. I hope that sharing my experience will be helpful to you. Please take whatever is useful and leave the rest behind. I'm going to begin by sharing a little bit about my pre-accident life, the brain injury, and its aftermath. That will give you some context as I share my journey back to happiness. After receiving my master's degree in adult education, I was primarily employed as a corporate trainer, designing and facilitating courses on a variety of subjects for local businesses. I really enjoyed teaching, designing creative lesson plans, seeing the aha look on people's faces when they got something, feeling like I could have an impact on people. I felt both confident and competent professionally. Outside of work, I was very involved in classical music. I had played the violin for 23 years. I was in a community orchestra. I also sang in a chorale and took voice lessons. I absolutely loved being an amateur musician, rehearsing, performing, being surrounded by sound. It was something I thought I was going to do for the rest of my entire life. On July 6, 1999, I was on my way to a meeting when I was broadsided on the driver's side by a car going about 50 miles an hour. I was sent home from the ER with a diagnosis of severe whiplash. The brain injury wasn't diagnosed until about 6 weeks later. When I tried to go back to my normal activities, it became apparent that something was not quite right. I was exhausted all the time. After just 2 hours of teaching a subject I taught many times before, with a co-facilitator helping me, I would spend 2 solid days on my couch, too wiped out to do anything. Teaching, which had always been so comfortable and fluid for me, now felt awkward and alien. I couldn't remember participants' names, what we had discussed. I lost track of what we were doing. It seemed like everyone was speaking so fast that I couldn't focus or follow the conversation. It was incredibly frightening and bewildering. I also tried to return to music rehearsals. Now, I had played in orchestras for more than 20 years, so it was a place that I had always felt completely at home. Not anymore. Walking in, it was like being confronted by an enormous wall of jarring, jagged, overwhelming noise. It sounded so loud that all I could do was cry. I couldn't tune it out and got so confused that I didn't know where to sit or how to change a broken violin string. I spent days on my couch, recovering from just a few minutes of sound. It seemed like the ultimate cruel joke to afflict a musician with an intolerance to noise. It felt like my entire life was just collapsing around me. I was also struggling at home. I'd buy a whole bunch of food at the grocery store, but it would go bad because I couldn't figure out what to do with it. There was a time when I ate cottage cheese for dinner most nights. I all but stopped reading the paper and magazines and books. My desk got piled high with stuff I didn't know what to do with. Family gatherings were awful. I had a hard time holding a conversation, especially if more than one person was talking. We were in a place with lots of background noise. My speaking was slow. I'd often lose my words. Often I didn't say anything. I felt so alone, like a stranger, among the people who knew me best. My emotions were all over the place. I cried a lot, often for no particular reason. I seriously wondered if I was going crazy. I kept thinking if I just tried harder, if I pushed harder, I could make it all go away. I desperately wanted to take control of the symptoms, but I couldn't. People kept telling me, "You look great," that I was doing fine, but I wasn't. I blamed myself for not trying hard enough, for being weak, for being lazy, when none of those judgments were accurate. I ended up having to give up both teaching and music. The longer that the symptoms continued, and the more I had to give up of my old life, the more frightened and worried I became. The grief was overwhelming. There were times, more than I like to admit, when I thought about ending my life. I'm going to read a poem I wrote during that time, which will give you an idea of my mindset. It's called Phoenix. At the end of my street, on the edge of the marsh, stands a tree. She does more than stand. She commands your attention. Full of her fall flash. No ordinary red, orange, and yellow for her. She sparkles with crimson, magenta, umber, and ochre plumage. A rising phoenix with outstretched wings, confident and bold. But her time is brief. Perhaps her colors burn too brightly. Her plumage dulls, darkens, and drops, exposing frail gray bones, pale and naked. Who is she now? The tree will have her time again. Will I? Several years later, I answered that last question in another poem. I'll share that at the end of my remarks. So in a nutshell, that's where I was. It seemed like my life was over. I couldn't imagine how I was ever going to be able to lead a full, happy, productive life again. My journey back to that place begins with my first key, regaining independence. Regaining independence has centered on being able to take care of myself at home and function out in the world. After my injury, I felt like a burden to my family and friends, like I was a failure as an adult. I absolutely hated what I'd been reduced to. I would often call family or friends and say, "I don't know what to do." Or even more difficult for them, I'd have a good half hour and call and tell them I was ready to get a full-time job, and then not quite understand why they disagreed so vehemently. I really had no idea of the extent of my impairments. It was primarily my occupational therapist who helped me to develop strategies and routines to regain my independence. We had to start small, find success, and build on that. I did not want to start small. I wanted to start on the big things, like work and music. I thought if only I could get back to those activities, then everything would be okay. However, every time I had tried, I failed, and those repeated failures gouged huge chunks out of my self-esteem and confidence, making me hate myself even more. What I needed to do was to relearn how to manage the tasks of everyday life: shopping, meal planning, cooking, bill paying, running errands, taking care of my home, visiting with family and friends. I needed strategies. I did not want to use strategies. I wanted to do things the way I used to do them. That was how I defined independence. I wanted to focus on healing, on a cure, not on strategies. I thought that if I used strategies to get things done, then my brain wasn't healing. It was like giving up, letting the injury win. With the help of family, friends, and many different kinds of medical professionals, I eventually realized I was wrong. Learning and using strategies are a crucial, necessary part of both healing and acceptance. Success with strategies feels a heck of a lot better than failure without them. I eventually realized that I need to do what works for my brain right now, not what used to work nor what I wished would work. That's not been an easy lesson for me, but it has been crucial to refinding happiness. When I focus on what I can't do, I spiral down into grief and self-pity, which is a very lonely, soul-sucking kind of place. Focusing on what I can do using strategies lifts me back up. My occupational therapist and I devised something called my Circle of Recovery. It was just a simple set of concentric circles with activities listed in each ring. It kind of looked like a bullseye. I needed something simple and concrete so I could judge how much progress I was making. The innermost circle was home. I had to concentrate on learning strategies so I could function successfully at home before I could function successfully out in the world. Finally experiencing success, even when success was just cooking dinner, was so very important to rebuilding my self-esteem. Experiencing success helped me to stay positive and motivated me to continue using strategies. Gradually, I worked on being out in the world more with family and friends, then more on my own. I'm now up to the point where I can be out of my house on my own for about 4 hours, several times a week. Every once in a while, I can hit 5 hours. I can't attach any deadlines to this process. Not that I have not tried. In the early days after my injury, I'd tell myself, okay, 3 months, then I'll be back to work. Then it was 6 and 9 and on it went. Every single deadline I set passed by without success, which only served to heighten my feelings of failure and unhappiness. Eventually, I came to view myself and my brain as two very separate entities. What I want to do, what my brain is able to do, often do not agree. I even named the brain injury. I call her Brain Hilda. I'll talk a little bit more about her later. My brain controls the pace of my recovery, not me, so there's no point in setting deadlines that I can't meet. I'm still using the Circle of Recovery to this day. It helps me gauge when I'm doing too much. I know that when tasks that I've mastered at home, like meal planning and cooking, start to fall apart, get difficult again, then that means that I'm out in the world too much. I need to take a step back to where I can find success again. As a result of using a lot of strategies, most of the time, I'm now able to organize my day, shop for groceries and other necessities, cook healthy meals, and take care of my home. Earplugs and special glasses help me function out in the world, albeit for a limited time. I've had to realize and accept that independence is quite different than it was before. It doesn't necessarily mean doing everything on my own. Sometimes it means asking for it and receiving help and following the advice that my family and friends and medical team give me. Often they're a lot better than I am at estimating what I can do. I tend to overestimate my capabilities. My life has lost a lot of its spontaneity. Everything I do takes careful planning. Gradually, as I felt more independent, I stopped hating myself. I didn't yet like myself again, and I still felt useless a good portion of the time, but not quite so helpless. Independence alone was not enough to make me happy. I had gotten better at managing the day-to-day chores, but that was only the start. I needed more. I needed to feel competent again. For much of my life, my sense of self was based on competence and achievement, on how much I could do and how well I could do it. I'm a classic type A perfectionist overachiever. I prided myself on being successful in most everything I wanted to try. I worked hard, but I very rarely struggled. I almost never failed. After the brain injury, so many things that had been easy were now difficult, if not impossible. Over and over and over again, I tried to return to the way life used to be, and over again, I failed. It was exhausting and emotionally devastating. I felt utterly incompetent and useless, like I'd lost my place in the world. Because my sense of self was so closely tied to my ability to achieve, when that changed, I totally lost myself. I've never felt more adrift in my entire life. Every psychologist and counselor I met with told me that achievers like me often had an especially difficult time adapting to and accepting brain injury. In my case, they were all correct. As an aside, for me now at this point, the difficulty of the task and the length of my journey have made the reward of happiness all that much sweeter. To regain a feeling of competence, I had to find new activities I could enjoy and feel successful at. I was very surprised to discover a desire to make things, to use my hands to create, something that I had had no interest in pre-injury. Because it was new, I had no comparison to how the old Carole would have done it. It didn't activate my grief over what I'd lost. I had absolutely no expectations of myself, and it didn't matter how much I could do or how well or fast I could do it. There was no timetable to follow or deadline to meet. I started out very simply with a basic paint by number. This is it right here. Because of my difficulties with fatigue, concentration, and attention, I could only work at it for about 15 minutes at a time, but I absolutely loved it. I enjoyed seeing the colors come together, the satisfying feeling of actually being able to start and finish something. I felt relaxed as I worked on it. As my feelings of competence grew, I tried other crafts, such as jewelry making and cross-stitch. I was motivated by how much they benefited me and how much other people liked what I made for them. Through these activities, I regained some of my ability to concentrate and pay attention. Completing projects gave me a sense of mastery and accomplishment. By making gifts, I was able to give to others, instead of always being on the receiving end of help. I participated in an art show here at New England Rehab, and people actually bought my jewelry, which felt very affirming. As part of my volunteering here, I've taught other brain injury survivors how to make jewelry, which gave me a way back into teaching, adding another layer of competence. 9 years ago, I participated in a workshop on creativity at the Maine Brain Injury Conference. There I had my first opportunity to speak briefly in front of a group again. I was nervous, but it felt like I was coming home. I knew I wanted to be able to do more of that. Over the years, I've gone from participating in panel discussions, to giving short presentations, to organizing workshops, to delivering keynote speeches. I also now co-facilitate brain injury voices. I can trace the competence that I gained from this simple paint by number to the competence I feel at this moment, talking to all of you. It took a long time, but gradually I stopped feeling like such a pit of bottomless need and began feeling like maybe I do still have something to offer the world. I started to be proud of myself again. For me, a big part of regaining competence has involved documenting it. I keep a portfolio of accomplishments, both large and small, that I'm proud of or that represent progress. It's called After the Crash. It started out as just a folder in my desk, but it's grown to a very thick 3-ring binder. Many of you have seen how big it's gotten, literally about this thick. I so need to start volume 2. It includes pictures of my crafts, poems, presentations, the meal plan my OT and I created, no more cottage cheese for dinner, programs from events I've gone to, my volunteer activities. Whenever I feel down, my portfolio reminds me just how far I've come. Looking at its size and its contents reminds me that I have a lot to be proud of. When I'm sad and all I can see is what I can't do, my portfolio lifts me back up. As I continued to make the crafts, especially the jewelry, a lot of people told me I should make it into a business, but that didn't appeal to me. I love it as a hobby only. I needed to find my sense of purpose somewhere else. I'm going to talk about purpose first in a big picture kind of way, finding my life's purpose, and then in a more detailed way, finding purpose and learning and meaning in brain injury itself. In hindsight, as I think about my life before brain injury, it was full of activity and busyness, but not so much on the purpose. On the day of my car accident, later that evening, I was actually supposed to be in 3 places simultaneously. I hadn't yet figured out where I was going to go. A Mercury Sable going 50 miles an hour took that decision right out of my hands. My life was on a path whose only endpoint was breakdown. Some sort of crash was inevitable. I just never dreamed it would be quite that literal. In order to maintain my sense of worth, I had to do more and more. I was running on a treadmill that just kept going faster and faster, without really taking me anywhere. I was moving so fast that I really couldn't enjoy anything. Life had just become a collection of activities. I so wanted to find my purpose, the knowledge of what I was put on the planet to do. I remember that gnawing at me. What was I supposed to do with my life? I enjoyed my work, teaching. I knew it was part of the answer. But I hadn't yet found a subject matter audience that I was passionate about. As awful as having a brain injury has been, one silver lining is that it sharply focused my sense of purpose. It left many of my skills, teaching, writing, speaking, mostly intact. I have lost the mental endurance, attention, concentration, and some of the executive function required to pursue those skills in any kind of traditional professional way. My visual, auditory, and vestibular sensitivities make it difficult for me to be vertical for more than a few hours at a time. I have to spend a lot of time resting on my couch, usually twice a day. But when I'm not on my couch, I know very clearly now that I want to use my life and my experiences to help brain injury survivors and the professionals who work with them through speaking, like today, and writing. I am working ever so slowly on a book. My limitations restrict how much I can do, but I discovered that having a sense of purpose is more about quality than quantity, about choosing to make meaning out of suffering. I certainly did not choose to have a brain injury, but I can choose to make something positive and life-affirming out of it. In fact, having a sense of purpose did much more than contribute to my refinding happiness. I think it also contributed to saving my life. As I mentioned earlier, I've had suicidal thoughts in the past. There were a number of reasons why I never acted on them. The love and support of family and friends, counseling, medication, and purpose. I knew that I was meant to learn something from brain injury, to do something with it, and if I checked out, I would miss that opportunity. I chose not to look at brain injury as some random event whose only purpose was to ruin my life. Instead, I chose to view brain injury as a teacher. As I'm sure many of you experienced in school, often the toughest teachers are the ones we learn the most from. Brain injury has definitely been my toughest teacher ever. The more life-changing the event, or the more powerful the emotion, the more opportunity it provides for learning. An attitude of learning keeps us from hiding in denial or wallowing in self-pity. By learning from our experiences, we can create meaning and purpose, and turn emotions like anger, sadness, and fear into acceptance, self-understanding, purpose, and joy. The realities of brain injury certainly do not make learning easy. It has been excruciatingly slow-going, full of trial and error, 2 steps forward, followed by 1 3/4 steps back, as well as times when it felt like I was not moving at all. But I have learned important, meaningful, hard-won lessons. Lessons that I may not have learned otherwise. I'd like to share with you just some of what brain injury has taught me over the years. It's not a sign of weakness to ask for help. Figuring out when I need help and asking for it are actually signs of courage and insight. Anytime can be nap time, and that's okay. I focus on what I can do in the present. I understand what it is to struggle. My empathy and perception skills are stronger as a result of that. I may get scared and have weak moments, but my determination, motivation, and refusal to give up will always win out. I'm not just a cracked version of my old self. I'm a new, whole person who is different than I used to be, but no less valuable. There are no small accomplishments. There was a time for me when successfully cooking supper was as big an achievement as standing here right now is. Successes build on one another. As you can probably tell, I believe very strongly in the value of reflection and learning. Thinking, writing, and talking about my brain injury has helped me to make sense of all that's happened to me. The better I understand my own experience, the better able I am to then use that experience to help others. So I encourage all of you to look for the opportunities to reflect and learn from brain injury. Early on after my injury, I decided I needed a lighthearted way to describe it, something that would make me and others laugh. As I mentioned earlier, often it seems like there's me, and then there's my brain injury. It's like there are two very different people residing in my head. So I named the brain injury Brainhilda. She has a personality all of her own. She's a tyrant. She is the diva in my head. Brainhilda gets what she wants when she wants it. When Brainhilda decides it's time for me to rest, there is no arguing with her. No matter what I plan to do, want to do, need to do, no matter where I am, who I'm with, or how much fun I'm having, if I don't honor her and lie down to rest, she will force me down. She gives me 2 choices, lie down or fall down. My family, friends, and medical team are all very well acquainted with Brainhilda and her antics. Depending on how mentally taxing the situation is, she does give me some warning, a heaviness in the left side of my head, a feeling of confusion, difficulty finding my words. My eyebrows become permanently raised, an expression my family fondly calls my deer-in-the-headlights look. However, if there's a sudden loud noise or too much movement around me, brain attacks full force, quite literally bringing me to my knees, quickly and without warning. I tell you all that as a way of mentioning another important component of happiness, which was mentioned by the panel, the use of humor. To continue with my door and key metaphor, humor is the WD-40, the grease that makes everything move more smoothly. Brain injury symptoms are very serious and not really funny, but the more that I can approach them lightheartedly and laugh when they happen, the easier it is to accept and deal with them. Laughing is a choice. When Brainhilda rears her ugly head and confines me to rest on my couch, my first instinct is to cry. And believe me, I have cried buckets of tears over all of this. With time, I've learned to see the humor in it. For example, several years ago I told my doctor that I've had so much beauty sleep that I really ought to be a supermodel by now. Okay, so I've regained independence, confidence, and purpose. I've even been able to find some humor in my situation. I should be happy, right? Well, I wasn't. The ongoing symptoms of my brain injury often pushed me into sadness and despair. I continued to struggle with at times overwhelming mental fatigue, as well as auditory, visual, and vestibular sensitivities, which have led more times than I care to count to overload and confusion and falls, and someone having to drive me home unexpectedly, followed by hours or even days on my couch recovering my energy. Whenever that happened, I would get so frustrated and embarrassed and upset. The emotional fallout from these episodes was almost as bad as the mental fallout. Then one day, many years ago now, I was meeting with my counselor, and she asked me this two-part question. Is it possible for you to accept that you're not going to make a full recovery? Can you still have a happy life? My reaction surprised us both. I instantly started crying. Not just a couple of tears, but outright sobbing. The loud, can't-catch-your-breath, hysterical kind of sobbing. The fact that my old life was over seared through me in a way that it never had before. In that moment, what I realized was that I had been judging every bit of improvement, every bit of my life, really, against the standard of the old Carole. In other words, I was still desperately trying to unlock the old door of happiness. Because my progress was never good enough to return to work, to music, to my old life, I was always failing in my own eyes. My happiness was conditional, dependent on how close to normal I thought I was functioning. I had thought that regaining independence, competence, and purpose would unlock the door to my old life, but they didn't, because in fact, they are the keys to my new door of happiness. After that conversation with my counselor, I was more able to stop judging myself against the old Carole and focus more on accepting and learning to appreciate the new Carole. About 5 years ago, I had another epiphany regarding happiness. Despite the fact that I liked myself again and mostly accepted the brain injury, I still struggled with the unpredictability of my symptoms. I just never knew when a sudden noise or movement or too much thinking or too much talking was suddenly going to overwhelm me. Despite my careful plans, things often went awry, many times in this building. I didn't get angry at myself anymore when this happened, but I did get angry at the situation, at how fragile and out of control I felt, at how much time I had to spend resting on my couch, at how often people had to rescue me and drive me home. I think my car has spent more nights away from home than I have. I kept trying to find the right strategy, the right treatment that would keep me from overloading. Then I went through a period where I had trouble sleeping, which of course left me even more tired during the day. As this was going on, it hit me. My life is always going to be like this. There is always going to be some brain injury symptom or other to deal with, no matter what I do. That realization had always depressed me before, but this time, I actually found it freeing. On that day, I finally, truly let go, gave in, surrendered. I stopped fighting what I had no control over. I realized that I didn't need to triumph over brain injury in order to be happy. I could accept both the symptoms and their unpredictability. It was a feeling of victory, not defeat. Surrendering and letting go have not miraculously cured my brain injury. I still tire easily, overload, sometimes need rescuing. I still struggle with awareness and overestimate what I'm capable of. I still deal with sound, visual, and vestibular sensitivities. I still spend more time on my couch resting than I'd like, and sometimes I feel sad about what I can't do. My brain injury symptoms are annoying, time-consuming, and limiting. Letting go means that I accept all of those things, focus on what I can do right now and what I need to do to be safe and to take care of myself. Letting go means that despite everything, I choose to be happy anyway. Letting go doesn't mean I've given up searching for and working hard at new treatments and strategies. I still see about half a dozen different doctors and therapists, and I continue to make progress, slowly and in small increments, even now, nearly 13 years post-injury. I refuse to give up. Letting go means that I trust that where I am right now in my recovery, even if that place often happens to be my couch, is where I'm supposed to be. I can be happy in the present moment, even as I strive to improve. That epiphany 5 years ago opened wide my new door of happiness. Since that time, I've been consistently happier than I was even before my brain injury. As I've talked about all these epiphanies I've had over the year, they may sound almost magical. Perhaps there are some of you out there thinking, how did she do that? Or, I could never do that. I know there are many instances when I sat in the audience at brain injury conferences, listening to someone talk about letting go and moving on, and thinking, there was no way on this green earth that I could ever do that. The very fact that I'm standing up here right now tells you that yes, it is possible to do. As I prepared this talk and thought more deeply about those epiphanies, they seemed less like instant magic and more like hard-won endpoints in a very long process. What I described to you was the culmination of years of talking and writing, thinking and listening, crying and laughing, learning and using strategies, falling down and getting back up. Every single step I took, even the ones that felt like they were going backwards, were steps in the direction of my new door of happiness. Many years ago, I was watching Andy Rooney on the television show 60 Minutes. He was talking about lessons he's learned over the years. One in particular stood out to me. He said, time doesn't heal all wounds, love does. That brings me to one final key that I haven't mentioned yet. That's because it's been an integral part of all of the others. I guess you could call it the master key. It's support, and it comes from multiple sources: family, friends, support groups, medical professionals. Brain injury is most definitely a team sport. I could not have gotten this far physically, mentally, or emotionally without my team. My ongoing recovery and renewed happiness is as much a testament to their dedication, patience, and optimism as it is to my own determination and hard work. So for those of you who are here, thank you. Brain injury has taken me on a road that I never could have foreseen and to lows I didn't know existed. But in addition to happiness, I've also found courage and insight I didn't know I had. Early on in my speech, I read you the poem Phoenix, which ended with a question. The tree will have her time again, will I? I always knew I would eventually write a response to that. It took many years, but here's my answer. This poem is titled Phoenix Revisited. At the end of my street, on the edge of the marsh, stands that same tree. The haunting, hoping desire, the tree will have her time again, will I? Finally answered with a quiet confidence. No, for that is the wrong question. I am no longer that tree. I'm a new being on a new journey, spinning, sailing, falling, flailing, writhing, wailing, landing, in my own soft space, safe to root and to rise, to live this new time. From where I stand right now, at this new door of happiness, I'm very glad I never gave up. Thank you.